Welcome to Corrective Consciousness, episode 153, the podcast where we explore the inanity of pop culture. I'm your host, vysethebold, and this is...
Lotus Prince.
And OldManStompy.
And we are back again with another part of our E3 review and review of what happened last week in gaming here. So we just had plenty to talk about, lots of Xbox backwards compatibility. We got plenty more here for you. I mean, no, we don't. But we have another half hour of you to get through. No. We got plenty here. So we'll start off by going over some Square Enix announcements. These were less. These weren't really showstoppers, but probably the biggest thing that was announced was that Final Fantasy VIII is getting a remastered treatment, similar to Final Fantasy VII, when they ported the PC version over to all the other versions of the other consoles.
Well, this is kind of interesting in particular, just because when they announced, look at all this stuff that's coming to PSN, we're getting Final Fantasy 7, 9, and 10. Like, 8 was very conspicuously missing. It was weird. I know 8's not the most popular Final Fantasy, but that felt really bizarre. So here it comes, finally.
It also has the most work that needs to be done with it. I think it still has its MIDI soundtrack on the PC.
Oh, jeez.
There is a fan hack that hacks in the PlayStation 1 soundtrack, which is far superior. Unfortunately, that has not been added officially like it had been with 7. Square's very inconsistent with these remakes. When they fix one, they don't fix the rest of them. It's like with Chrono Trigger for Steam.
It took insane backlash to get that to happen.
Yeah, they fixed that one, but they didn't fix any of the other games that were just like it. Which is, it wouldn't have taken them any time at all. They fixed that game in under basically like a couple weeks, which
So like this is something that we've discussed before. Like we mentioned that the source code for the original Kingdom Hearts game had been lost quite some time ago, but they still managed to reconstruct the game from the existing assets because it was worthwhile to do so. It just never really seemed worthwhile, I guess, to reconstruct Final Fantasy VIII, which kind of leads you to the conclusion that maybe this isn't the bombshell that like Vice is acting like it is. It definitely is not like the most exciting news for the general public that was announced at this conference. It just like is very surprising.
This is the biggest one,
specifically for people from our age group and our gaming backgrounds.
Who happens to like Final Fantasy VIII,
which I do not. So this shows you how much I care about the rest of the shit.
I don't know if you've seen this, but like in the wrestling fandom, there's like one place where the WWF does shows where like there's these two guys who are like over the course of years having an argument about Final Fantasy VIII. Like every time they come back, there's one guy who has a sign that says like Final Fantasy VIII is awesome, and then the next time they come back, there's a guy who says Final Fantasy VIII is the worst fucking game.
That's amazing.
And like people will scour the audience to look for their signs every time they go back to that one city.
That's so good.
Yeah, the thing is like 8 is very divisive because it's kind of a game where in order for the systems to work, you need to break them. And some people don't think that breaking the system is very much fun.
Well, the thing is, 8 can be really frustrating because in order to cast spells, you have to draw them from monsters, which sounds like a really cool idea. But you're like, it'd be awesome being able to just cast spells without having to constantly draw in the middle of an important battle. So you'll just spend hours drawing the same spell from some low-level monster, and you're like, this isn't how it should be.
Yeah, I was definitely in the batch of people that this game did not sync up with me. So, but a lot of other people really love it. It's become kind of a cult favorite. Even if you could call a greatest hits title from PS1 that sold millions of copies a cult hit, it's just didn't fare well in the collective unconscious of the gaming audience, but it's still kind of come back around.
Yeah, the music was great as ever. It introduced the Gunblade, which is pretty cool. And speaking of a beautiful game, the summons are great. And it also has Diablos. Diablos never really came back. Like, he was alluded to in FF12, but summoning Diablos straight up, I think, might be FF8 only, and he looks badass. It's great.
Well, he's in 14 also. He is in 14? He's the chief villain for one of the like side arcs of the storyline.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and this game is mostly notable for its CG cutscenes, which at the time were breathtaking, and they still looked pretty good. I mean, it looks like an old game by this point, but if you compare it to any of its contemporaries, it blows them away.
It was a tech demo for the PS4, correct, to show that it could render the what we thought was the CGI cutscene, the waltz with the Balan fish that was like the famous dance scene from Final Fantasy VIII in real time with polygonal graphics instead of as a pre-rendered cutscene.
Yeah, and even when you first turn the game on, like I think it's before you hit the title screen, like it's like PlayStation 2 logo or PlayStation 1 logo, excuse me, and then like the fight between Squall and Cypher, it looks gorgeous. Like even today, it looks pretty good.
Yeah, no, it definitely has its positives. Also has a story that makes even less sense than most Final Fantasies.
The story is out there, yeah.
Yeah, but you'll be able to make this judgment for yourself. It's definitely an outlier in the series. Maybe if you don't like a lot of the other mainstream titles in the franchise, you'll like this one because it's a weird one. It's a weird one.
You know how some of the more recent Final Fantasy games have had like those card mini games?
Mm-hmm. This was the first one with a card game.
Yeah, I think it was the first Triple Triad.
It's
a pretty sweet game. And what's funny is when you get
if you can understand the rules.
I was just going to mention that like different regions in the world have different rules. It's not different rule, but different modifications to the rules. Like you can do this here, but not in another country. But by the end of the game, you could find one person who, I don't know who this person is, but you could talk to this person to just modify the rules in the country so every place plays whatever way you want.
So, like, Triple Triad has been by far the most enduring aspect of Final Fantasy VIII historically because it's become its own standalone app on the Final Fantasy like web portal.
It's cool.
It's all right.
Yeah, and you could even play with a real deck at one point as well.
Oh, nice.
But anyway, we need to move on. We don't want to get stuck in backwards compatibility territory here. So Crystal Chronicles Remastered made some appearance here. This, of course, was a game that was already announced, but it looks like to me that you don't have to hold the cup anymore. Which is what everybody's complaint always was.
I would say that was like actually by far let's remember that to play Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles on the GameCube, you needed like 3 people with Game Boy Advances, and 3 link cables that could connect them to a GameCube in order to play multiplayer. Like this game finally will get its chance to shine just by allowing you to play, online multiplayer, which is like what the game sorely needed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we'll move on from that. It was a fun game otherwise if you could actually make it work. I hope they do that someday with the Four Swords Adventure games. Really hope that they
the
they
original,
do that
either Four Swords, but the original Four Swords was the Game Boy Advance one, right?
Yeah, but the GameCube one was a very fun game. If you ever got a chance to play it.
Didn't the GameCube one also have like GBA compatibility?
Oh yeah, it's just like Crystal Chronicles. You needed to have GBAs to play it, multiplayer. So yeah, because you needed to have your own screen if you went into like dungeons and stuff, or went into caves and stuff without the other people.
Yeah.
So anyway, so the Final Fantasy VII remake is going to be March 2020. That is going to be the first of the episodes, if as far as I understand. This one's going to they confirmed that it will still be episodic. Yeah. Apparently the remake plays great from everybody who's played it. They like the way it plays, which is a relief. I don't have much else to say on it because it's like one of those things that pretty much everybody's following this if you're into video games.
It looks like it plays like a mana game, which to me is like part of what's so exciting. Like, it plays like an action RPG with a pause menu, and that to me is the kind of gameplay that we haven't had in a very long time, and to me it's my favorite style of JRPG, where you're like active most of the time, but you're not like constantly pressured to put like actions in like in the Dark Souls style games.
Sure. Apparently people are loving it. I'm a little weirded out that they fired CyberConnect too, because they generally make really high quality products.
I was always under the impression that they didn't fire them, just that they hired them to do a certain level of contract work, and the work was completed, and then they returned the rest of the work to an in-house studio. The news didn't ever strike me that it was not an amicable cessation of the business deal.
Okay. Well, I hope that that's the case, because from what I heard, they scrapped everything that they did. But who knows whether any of that's accurate.
It seems like the game is going pretty well, and it seems to be releasing, I don't know necessarily on schedule, but within a reasonable time frame from when they've been showing active, screenshots of the game in motion.
Well, now that Kingdom Hearts 3 is done, I'm sure they're focusing everything on that, which is their next big release. Let's be honest. So there was a Final Fantasy 14 announcement, Shadowbringers. Do you have a little bit to say about that, OldManStompy?
Yeah, that's the next expansion to the game. It's coming out at the end of the month, so there's been a big flurry of activity. The storyline to the previous expansion closed out a couple of months ago. Most of the gearing up that you'd normally do was made a lot easier, so that you don't have to grind every week at specific times, and you can get ready for the new expansion that will basically make all of that gear worthless almost immediately. And they drop a Titanic potential storyline spoiler at the tail end of what was otherwise a pretty mundane trailer of all in-game footage that people had already seen. The big deal with this game is that they're supposed to bring in what's called the trust system, which had previously been used in Final Fantasy XI. In 11, it's also an online game. It's been around for about 20 years, and there aren't very many people playing it anymore. But you can use the trust system to it's basically their single player mode, where you can hire in-game the main storyline NPCs to run the dungeons with you, and they're worse than. I want to say that they're worse than you'd normally expect from a pickup group, but after having played Final Fantasy XIV for quite some time, you can never underestimate how low a pickup group can go. A lot of people, I think, personally, what I liked the most about 14 was that I never needed to interact with another human being except to do dungeons, and even then you didn't have to look for a group. You just went into a roulette system and you got dropped in there with a bunch of people that you never had to talk to, because the dungeons are mostly pretty easy. So to have the trust system so that I can play occasionally with my friends like Mr. Ryu and Minty Mitz when they are available, and otherwise just play through the game at my leisure is pretty nice.
Nice. Do you have any more to say about that?
That's it. Oh, actually, funny story. So every expansion there's a end game raid content. The first one.
Sure.
The first one was based on Bahamut, the second one was based on Alexander, the third one was based on Omega. They're all sort of built around very famous, large bonus bosses or major bosses or summons in previous Final Fantasy lore. And this time it's actually based off of Eden, the Final Fantasy VIII. Yeah, so they're not afraid to draw from all aspects of the lore. Last expansion there was also a long storyline that was a fond recollection of the combination of Final Fantasy XII and Final Fantasy Tactics, which both take place in the same universe. So that was pretty cool.
By the way, just for context, in case Vice, do you know which one Eden is?
I know that Final Fantasy VIII has some references to the end of time and the end of life, but I'm not sure how that fits into Eden.
More where I'm going is not really the lore, but how Final Fantasy VII. I mean, it's not as long as fucking this, but how Final Fantasy VII has Knights of the Round, which is just this huge long animation. Final Fantasy IX, I forgot what did it, but it also has this massive scene for one of the summons. Eden is a pretty long summon sequence because it's the last summon you get and it's over the top. So
gotcha.
The fact like Alexander and Bahamut, I don't know if they took as long. Bahamut I think is the most grand of the summons, but Eden is just pure length. Watch this cool scene we made.
I just want to quickly point out, since I don't think we've ever talked about this before, and I think you'd appreciate it, that in Heaven's Word, the first expansion to Final Fantasy XIV, the final boss actually is Knights of the Rounds, and they play the fact that they use Ultimate End as their desperation move, and the animation actually plays into it because you have until the end of the animation to break the mechanic or else you die.
Oh shit!
So
that's terrifying.
The fact that it's a terrifyingly long animation actually is when it's you who's cool. Receiving it, all of a sudden it never feels like it takes enough time.
Yeah, that's great.
That's awesome. Okay. Any other insights?
That's it. I'm sure we'll be talking about it a lot. It is
Sure.
Minty Mitz's Binding of Isaac. It is her like primary game all the time. So we'll have Ron when the game comes out, I think.
Yeah, we should have you, Mr. Ryu, and Minty Mitz on sometime to talk about Final Fantasy XIV because the three of you would have a lot to say.
I'm sure there are absolutely no future life events for me that will prevent me from playing a lot of an MMORPG in the near future.
You're the one who said it.
Yep.
No. All right. So moving on to this, this is actually kind of fits with the backward compatibility, oddly enough, of the Xbox stuff from the previous episode this week. But Last Remnant Remastered was released on the Switch. So this is another early Square RPG, early HD Square RPG before they had put out like a Final Fantasy, on consoles like that, like an HD console. It was way before 13 ever came out.
It's also one of their first PC releases, I think.
Yeah, so they were pretty open about putting this on PC, but this game has garnered a favorable reputation amongst its fans. It unlike Infinite Undiscovery, which doesn't have a really good following, this game has a cult status. This one's probably more popular now than it was when it came out. So the general consensus is that it's almost like a saga game. It has a lot of unusual systems, but they actually work really well in this game, in particular. So I don't know much about the particulars, but apparently it plays like a really good saga game. Which oddly enough, there are a couple other saga games being announced. Romancing Saga 3. Which is a remake of the Super Famicom game, right?
I think it just is straight up the Super Famicom game. Like I don't think it's anything distinct. It's I think the 6th game in the Saga series.
Sure, after the first 3 on Game Boy, right?
First 3, I think the first one. Yes, the first 3 are on Game Boy.
The first 3 are on Game Boy, and then Romancing Saga 1 and 2 at least are on Super Famicom, and 3 are on Super Famicom. So the Romancing Saga games are generally considered better than most of the other Saga games. So Unlimited Saga is considered the low tier, probably one of the worst games Square ever made by almost everybody who tries to play it and give it a second chance to kind of defend it, end up giving up and saying, no, this is a heap of garbage.
I have tried to start this game like a dozen times. I've owned it since it came out on the PS2, and it has just never been a good experience.
Romancing Saga 3 is a much, much better game. And apparently, we already have the remake of 2 on the Switch, if I'm not mistaken. So that's pretty cool that they're bringing over both of those. All of these now. And Saga Scarlet Grace, I don't know much about that. Somebody else put that in the
anniversary. It's the 25th anniversary title. It came out a couple of years ago, and this is basically an official acknowledgement of it coming out in the West.
Okay. All right. So what was that on 3DS or something?
I think it was PS4.
Oh, it was a PS4 game. Okay. But a lot of people like the Saga Frontier games as well. I don't have any experience with them, but apparently the Romancing Saga ones are more mainstream, and Last Remnant fits right along with them. So if you like kind of offbeat traditional RPGs, this is it. So the Avengers game is coming out in May 2020. Crystal Dynamics is making this, the Tomb Raider team.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
I believe so. Yeah, they came out and talked about it during the conference. That's why I thought that and the Outriders game would be like the lead for the Square Enix part of our discussion, and not fucking Final Fantasy VIII. But that doesn't even have like a remake aspect to it.
Well, the big problem is that Avengers was basically confirmed as not canceled. This game has been in the works for a long time, and nobody's seen hide nor hair of it for a long time, so people had kind of thought that it had gotten dropped. And especially with, the Avengers, the big tentpole release having already come out, people thought, for sure that, people had forgotten about it, or, the Square had forgotten about it. But apparently it's still in the works, has a very divisive art style. I can't defend it. The funniest post that I saw was like, you remember that scene in Spaceballs where they have their stunt doubles?
Yeah, I saw that scene. You idiots! These are not them.
So they just look like off-brand and unappealing versions of the cinema versions of their characters.
Yeah, it's a little weird, right? Because the cinema version of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is already kind of like a pop culture-ified, like very junk foody retelling of a lot of Marvel stories. It doesn't have a lot of the emotional pathos that you're used to from some of the heavier stories that they've tried to cover, and like a lot of the it's basically meant for everything to be like very uplifting, and this is like even a stage below that. It's like the grape drink to like the movies like Grape Soda.
Well, the disappointing part about this is that you have another Avengers game basically coming out on the Switch. You have the Ultimate Alliance 3, and that looks great. And in fact they announced DLC for the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, which was a nice surprise. Now that Disney has those properties back. So. And they look good. They look like, they're part of, Marvel's house style. The Crystal Dynamics ones do not look like Marvel's house style at all.
It feels like the kind of game that, took a long time to get out the door. It kind of reminds me of, The Division, in the sense that it looks really unimpressive, and because of the star power of the development team behind it, you could see it growing into something pretty good over time, but the market moves so fast right now and things get abandoned so quickly that I don't think it'll really get the chance. I think the online numbers will go down almost immediately after it comes out, and unfortunately a lot of the work that went into this game will not be properly appreciated.
It's a shame too, because we're kind of riding high on good Marvel stuff. I mean, the Spider-Man game has universal acclaim and is considered by a lot of people to be one of the best depictions of Spider-Man ever, in general. And also his stable of characters were treated extremely well in that game, and to see them not even treated in the visual aspect, it's not like it's like they tried something daring, like a Wind Waker thing where everybody's complaining about that, or it just looks ugly. Is the best way to describe it. It's not that I dislike it. It's just that nobody likes it.
You can do a lot of work on a game in a year. I remember to speak to a game that more or less just came out, Bloodstained, looked ugly as sin in the first trailers that were shown, and that was a much smaller development team than the one that's working on the Avengers game, right? It's basically an indie game. And that cleaned up substantially before the final release. After.
Did you see the trailer for it being cleaned up?
Oh yeah, no, that's fantastic. They even
it was brilliant.
They showed old new, but the first time they showed old, it said poop, and then just backspaced it out and said old.
But not only that though, but it showed all sorts of comments oh, these graphics don't look good, blah blah blah, on the Kickstarter comments, and you see Iga on his Dracula chair with his glass of wine, and he throws the glass down and breaks it like a symphony of the night. He's like, "I'll prove them wrong."
It was great.
It was so funny.
It was the kind of tongue-in-cheek thing that Mighty Number 9 was trying to do and failed at, that they succeeded at tremendously. Poking fun at themselves.
I mean, this was self-deprecating. All right, I'll make it better. Where Mighty Number 9 was I don't know what it was doing. It was making fun of its own fan base. The fuck?
Yeah.
The crying anime fan on prom night.
The anime fan at prom night. Yeah, I remember that.
This isn't the 90s. Who wrote this?
So, I mean, that's how to handle this. And also, you could tell there is an earnest effort to make good on making sure that Bloodstained comes out as a good product. Not only so it can be a good release and also have a lineage to live up to and all that stuff, but also to not let people down who backed it, which which is extremely important, I think, to IGA at the moment. So,
well, not to mention, like, this was like this was right along there with Shenmue. This was one of the first gigantic video game Kickstarter campaigns.
Sure.
So this kicked off the fact that Shenmue's own Kickstarter could happen. So people exploded over this. So you definitely want to get it working.
Well, I mean, they've made good so far. I mean, their bonus game is a fully fledged NES style game.
The bonus game is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's a good game on its own.
Yeah, it's it fits right in with the classic Castlevanias.
That game is as good or better than any game like it on the NES. So yeah, I mean, it's fully fledged. It doesn't feel like a side game in the slightest.
No, if you wouldn't have you could easily play this game without having any idea that it even shared the name with on a bigger original game.
Usually it's a pet peeve of mine that companies go out of their way to make a game that's deliberately in the 8-bit style when they know that they have the talent and the capacity to do better. But this was a side thing that you got for free for backing the original game, more or less. And to me that's phenomenal.
Yes. It was good on its own, and I wouldn't even be upset if that's all we got. It was that good. Now, I will say that the game proper will be out the time of this release, shouldn't it? It comes out on Thursday, doesn't it?
Officially, I think it was the 18th. Was it the?
Yes, it should be sort of technically out by the time we finish recording this podcast.
I actually got my copy in the mail the day we recorded this podcast.
Gotcha. So we'll find out if there's any backlash by next week. But we'll move on here. I hope Avengers can turn around, and I hope it's a good experience because just selfishly.
Speaking of moving on regarding Kickstarters, backlash, and Shenmue, why don't we go to that one real quick? Shenmue 3.
Yeah, we can mention that quickly. We do need to return.
There's not too much to discuss, honestly.
The big thing is that they came out as releasing on the Epic Store rather than Steam exclusively, at least for a certain amount of time.
Well, this got people super mad in steps because this happened with Metro Exodus, right? It's going to be a year Epic exclusive, but the people who pre-ordered it on Steam could still get to use their Steam codes. This is not the case. People asked Deep Silver on Twitter what's going to happen because the people who kickstarted this got to choose
specifically
PS4 physical.
Said Steam.
It's not PC, it's Steam. Yeah, PS4 physical, PS4 digital, Steam physical, Steam digital. And they straight up said that the Steam codes will not be honored. It's going to be Epic Store. And a lot of people were furious, and there were calls for refunds and everything. The most recent thing I heard was a couple of days ago. The Kickstarters got an email saying all right, we're gonna try and sort this out. We've heard your feedback. We'll see what we can do about it. So there's not really any kind of new results yet, but at least something may happen as a result of this, even if it's just honoring the people who backed their copies or whatever. Because the Metro fans were pissed, but if you pre-ordered it, then you get what you wanted anyway. But these people have been backing Shenmue for 4 or 5 years or something, and then it's nope, fuck you.
This is exactly what I keep complaining about every time we bring up something that the Epic Games Store does. We've always talked about how this balkanization of services, in principle, the fact that competition exists should be a positive for consumers, but what's really going to happen is that they're going to produce all of these exclusivity contracts, and you're going to wind up with the illusion of choice, where, for example, people who purchased Shenmue 3 will have no choice but to start using the Epic Games Store with all of its positives and negatives, including the things we know about its data collection, habits, or lose access to this game that they literally already paid for, or go through whatever Kickstarter
and didn't intend to.
That's where I was going to go. If it were an Epic exclusive, people would be mad and be like, geez, I guess I have to use the Epic Store. But this was just a malicious move by Epic, which is we're just gonna make you use us or else. That's a bit of a different thing. You could just say, well, I won't buy Shenmue then, but you already bought it.
All exclusivity moves to some extent are malicious, at least in purpose.
Yeah,
but
this was done retro. Yeah, but this and Metro Exodus were done retroactively, so it felt like just an extra bit of dickery. It's not what was it? Rise of the Tomb Raider will be a 1-year Xbox exclusive, and PS4 owners were like, god damn it. But this was like, we're taking that thing that you already intended to get that had been lined up already, and we're going to now make it an Epic exclusive. Like, what the fuck, man? Like, and like, this was really like last minute too. Like at the last second, after years and years, now it's an Epic exclusive. Like, what a dick move.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm totally on your side here, and with the Epic stuff. I do not like what they're doing.
And by the way, I should point out, no clicking on a launcher other than clicking on Steam is not hard to do. It's just that, like, fuck
that's
Epic
not my
is the
reasoning
point.
behind it. My reasoning is their business practices.
Yeah, it's just really sleazy and mean-spirited.
Yeah. Well, we have to move on here, or else we're not going to get nearly through enough here. But let's see here. So you mentioned Outright. Oh, I did want to mention real quick about Shenmue 3.
Yeah.
One of the big revelations is that it's not. It's done without the blessing of. It's done with the blessing, but not with any involvement of Sega at all. So it's not going to have any Sega references or anything like that, and it's not published by it.
Well, I don't know about Shenmue 2, but Shenmue 1, like, it's like Yakuza now. There's tons of Sega arcade games you can play and stuff like that. Shenmue 1 was like
big
that.
Part
Shenmue
of what
2
made it good.
May have as well, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's part of what made it good. It's kind of disappointing.
Like, all the Sega gacha toys, like, that was a huge thing to do in the game during your downtime, and Shenmue 1 had a lot of fucking downtime.
Mm-hmm. Okay, moving on. You said something about Outriders. I don't know anything about this.
I have to admit, I don't know that much about it either. I just know that it was a game that was announced during the Square Enix conference by People Can Fly, I think was the name of the developer. They co-developed one of the Fortnite games. They're like a branch. They were up until recently a branch of Epic Games. For as much as we love talking about them, they did. They co-developed several of the Gears of War games. They did Bulletstorm. They did
Gotcha.
The Painkiller games.
Cliffy B, is he involved with them?
I don't recall.
Cliffy B made Bulletstorm, I know that.
Okay, well then
didn't Cliffy B make Jazz Jackrabbit?
Yes.
Nice.
Then he was certainly
and Unreal.
Yeah, then he was certainly involved with the studio at some point. But yeah, so they're making a new game called Outriders. I thought we would talk more about that, but frankly, I was so like absorbed in the afterglow of like all the IPs and the remakes of games that I already knew that I kind of glossed it over. But probably I will enjoy it when it comes out. I do try to like at least keep up with the Square Enix releases that are not part of their like JRPG back catalog, because that is such a slog lately.
Yeah. How about Brave Exvius? I don't know much about that.
So that's the their top mobile title. There's a spin-off game coming out that like is distinct from the mobile game that already exists. I played the Record Keeper mobile game from Final Fantasy, not Brave Exvius, but like both have like pretty healthy communities. And supposedly Exvius has like a really interesting original story that people were really into that goes in seasons. Much better than the Record Keeper one. So I guess people are like, like Pyro always says he plays Grand Blue Fantasy because it has a surprisingly good story and he's like really interested in it and the art style, right? So this is like in the same vein. It has like legitimate exploration. You like actually walk around and like open treasure chests and explore dungeons and whatever on top of the regular like gacha mechanics that you expect from a free-to-play game. So I actually don't know what genre the new game is, but they're like clearly trying to hang on to the IP. The biggest fear that you have with these free-to-play games is that you spend money on like all these items for your character, and then all of a sudden the game just shuts down. At any point, and then all the money that you spent in it is just gone forever. So at least if they're like opening up other games in the series, then it seems like they're looking to expand, and hopefully like you won't have the rug pulled out from under you for at least like another couple of years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I don't know anything about the Kingdom Hearts 3 DLC either.
To be honest, nobody knows anything about Kingdom Hearts at any point, even the people who have played all the games. I know that like Pyro has attempted
and the people making it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I've told you this story, right? That they had to remind Tetsuya Nomura that that like Master Ericus like was supposed to be Square misspelled and a version of Yensid, the guy who's like Disney spelled backwards.
Yeah, Disney backwards.
And because he had just like totally forgotten that's why they named the character that in like
that's
the design
amazing.
meetings. So like I'm not surprised. There's no possible way that any like single human understands the entirety of the Kingdom Hearts story at any one point in time.
You gotta look like one of those conspiracy nuts with like the graphs with all the
yarn,
the strings point to like this bubble connects to that one, and it all makes sense somehow.
So,
like you're like the Question in the Justice League.
I don't know how much we want to talk about the ending of Kingdom Hearts 3. Like what's okay? What's okay to talk about?
I mean,
I don't know anything about it.
I don't know anything about these games, and I mean, you're not
care
really
about spoilers,
spoiling.
But other people might.
Yeah, I don't know.
All right, so
it's probably not a good idea.
I guess it's recent enough that we don't want to go into it too much. But the ending of the game was like pretty exciting, and like led one to believe that the next game in the series would be like a little bit more focused on the RPG side of things instead of the Disney.
Will there be more James Woods?
I hope not.
No, you know, it'd be funny if the next Kingdom Hearts game had just like only the Square Enix characters and no Disney to like compensate for Kingdom Hearts 3.
Having only the Disney characters.
It's just like only the Final Fantasy characters in Kingdom Hearts 4, whatever the next game is.
Sure.
They should just have a standalone gummy ship game.
Yeah, that was one of the best parts of Kingdom Hearts 3. But anyway, the DLC seems like it's really focused on the organization, which is like a really, you know, they've always been like really popular with the Kingdom Hearts fandom because they're so cool.
Yeah.
And we know like basically nothing about them. Aside from the fact that they look kind of cool and they wear trench coats.
It's been like 15 years and we still know nothing about them.
It's just like the Turks.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. The Turks are also like incredibly popular side characters, such that they got like entire scenes in the Advent Children movie. And like an
they
entire
have their
game.
own game.
Yeah, they got their own game with characters that we've never heard of before or ever heard of again.
What's their
It was
own
a cell phone game. It was a cell phone game.
Okay, I was gonna say the only spin-off I knew about was like the Vincent's game, like Dirge of Cerberus.
So there was a
there's Crisis Core
there was
too.
an AC, BC, CC, and DC. That's how you remember the 4 Final Fantasy spins off. It was Advent Children, Before Crisis, Crisis Core, and Dirge of Cerberus.
Oh no way! That's amazing. Was that intentional?
Yes, I'm sure.
Okay.
Well, maybe. I don't know.
Anyway, let's move on. All right. Bethesda had some pretty cool stuff going on. Some apologies for Vault 76 that nobody cares about, and you should still not care about it.
Well, no, that was the thing. Their presentation was like, guess what, guys? We're going to have NPCs, and we're going to have quest lines. It's like...
Oh, you want to give us a full game after we bought it a year later? Yeah,
well, I was going to say, NPCs and quest lines are what Fallout is. Like, can you imagine Skyrim without quest lines or NPCs? What the fuck are you doing in that game? Like, we're going to make... Guess what, guys? We're going to make our Fallout game a Fallout game.
Without the quest lines, it's basically like the DMV.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you're just wandering the wasteland, which I could see that being a game in and of itself, like a walking simulator thing, but that's not what Fallout was trying to be.
Yeah.
Like, it was trying to be, hey players, you make our game for us. Like, you talk to other players and do whatever you do. I don't know.
Yeah, just play Obsidian's next game on the Xbox. You'll be fine. So there were some other exciting things that they went over. Doom Eternal, more footage of that. Also announcing that you can get the Doot Imp, which is pretty cool.
They need to do the whole soundtrack over with the trumpets.
But for anybody not familiar with it...
It's so stupid.
Yeah, there was... a tooting imp in the background of one of of this parody thing that somebody made, and apparently they made him a real skin that you can get if you pre-order the game, which is pretty cool.
That's such a like NetherRealm Studios thing to do. That's such a Capcom thing to do. We'll make it real. It's fine.
They made Doot canon.
Scarlet is canon. Shenlong, Gouken is canon now.
Yeah.
So, Doot is canon.
Doot is canon. This is great, and they actually call him Doot, which
is
is even
idiotic.
better.
I love it.
So yes, he is officially in the game. So Wolfenstein Youngblood got announced, which is really neat. So this is the sequel to what was the last one called?
There was New Order and Old Blood, right?
It was. Well, no, Old Blood was the spin-off game.
Old Blood is what I have.
Okay, yeah, the more recent Wolfenstein game. I forgot what it was called. Maybe is Wolfenstein Youngblood like Image Comics from the 90s? Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, it's Wildstorm.
Everyone's drawn mediocre and they have triangle feet.
Thank you, Rob Liefeld.
Yeah.
No, I think it's called New Order. Well, the original one's called New Order, and then it was Old
one
Blood.
of them was like something Colossus, right?
Yeah, that's it. New Colossus. So this is a sequel to New Colossus.
Okay. Even newer Colossus.
So you get to play as B.J. Blazkowicz's twins in this one, and it takes place in like post-Nazi or Nazi taking over 80s, whereas the other games were in the 60s, like an alternate version of the 60s. So this is like an alternate version of the 80s, and it looks awesome. I'm really looking forward to this game. It looks really cool. In the same breath, they also announced a new Commander Keen game. That's a mobile game, apparently.
Yeah, we mentioned this briefly last week. It was like nobody asked for this.
So that was the first thing that I thought of. I was watching the conference, and the woman who's emceeing it at the time comes out, and she goes, "Imagine this platformer re-envisioned as a free-to-play mobile game." And I was just like, who would have ever imagined that, except for some asshole in a suit at a CEO meeting who thought that this would actually sell copies of games?
And like nobody the only people who know anything about Commander Keen are like our age. Otherwise, it'll be like, oh, it's some little cartoony kid game, I guess. I don't know what this is.
Yeah, but they more solidify that B.J. Blazkowicz is Commander Keen's grandfather, which is pretty cool. By a picture in the background. They don't confirm which of the twins is his parent, but I guess you got to assume that the male one is. Because of the last name, but it
doesn't really matter.
That doesn't really matter. You know, people keep
I
their last names too.
All of the lineage of the Blazkowicz.
It's gonna be like the Zelda series. It's gonna be whatever you want it to be. You know.
Yeah, that is true. If the Nazis win in this timeline, you have New Colossus. Otherwise, in Wolfenstein 3D, like the Allies win, and then you go to the Commander Keen timeline. Like, all right,
the real grandparent is the friends we made along the way.
Well, you know, I can't wait to see how they solidify that the Doom Marine is also related. So that's cool.
Yeah.
But we'll move on here.
It'll be
there was
in their final Smash when the Doom Marine is in Smash Brothers.
Yeah, although the Keen family shows up.
I do just briefly want to touch on this before I move on to other things here, but XE Marvelous had announcements as well. The most, probably the biggest announcement that wasn't known was a Grand Blue Fantasy fighting game called Versus.
Well, I mean, that's not a new game. Like, that had been announced in Japan for some time. I guess they're just localizing it, right?
Yeah. And also, they are remaking the original Akiba's Trip. The one that we have currently is the sequel.
That's right, yeah. It's like, I can't believe I'm making this connection, but America's like Akiba's Trip, and there's Akiba's Beat. Like, our Akiba's Trip is Japan's Akiba's Trip 2. Just like our Kingsfield 2, 3, and 1, 2, and 3 are Japan's Kingsfield 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah,
look, you get an entire segment of this podcast to advertise your videos. You know, why do you have to leak this?
I wasn't even advertising my videos. Just
don't pollute your. Don't promote. Self-promote. It's not
I wasn't. I just mentioned
no
Kingsfield.
bills.
You guys promoted me. I didn't mention I was playing it. Now you did.
It's more promotion for you than it is for From Software. I can tell you that. Okay.
Yeah.
So
From Software had their chance and nobody fucking took it back then.
I'm gonna move on and not probably bring this up because it's too big of a topic. But CD Projekt Red is dicey right now. I'm going to reserve that for another time because it is a big topic. And it involves them being shitty and also not planning well and offending a whole bunch of people all in the same breath. So I am not going to even delve into that because we'll go on for an hour just on that topic alone.
Call me next week.
Yeah. No, I'm sure you have plenty to say, and so do I, and so I'm sure so does Lotus, because it's a major offense. What's been going on, but we just don't have the time for the moment. It deserves its time for a whole discussion. So I'm not even going to delve into it. Sega did announce Citizens of Space, which was a pretty big surprise. It's a sequel to a cult hit called Citizens of Earth that is very Earthboundy, and it apparently has a lot of fans. But it's just like one of those indie cult hits. But I never actually got a chance to play it.
It was at RPG Limit Break this year, which is like the big RPG speedrun. It's like the RPG equivalent of AGDQ or SGDQ. And I was kind of surprised to see it there because it took me a while. So every speedrun, like big speedrun marathon these days, has like the shitty games block run by like Brosentia and his buddies. And I thought that it was in that block, so I didn't pay very much attention to it until you told me that this new game was coming out, like more or less, or until I saw it in the notes.
No, it's not a shitty game. It's apparently quite good.
That's awesome.
By the way, real quick, I should mention this now that OldManStompy just brought the name up, but SGDQ next week, baby.
Oh, yeah.
My hype is real.
We'll talk about that, I'm sure, in good time as well. But I did want to get to some more non-E3 news here. Terra Onion just had their FPGA Direct. Did you guys catch wind of this on Twitter?
No.
Okay,
I'm not that much on Twitter yet.
Okay, so Terra Onion is the company that made the SSDS3, which is the thing that you could hook into the back of a PC Engine or TurboGrafx 16, and it's an optical drive emulator for it. And they also made the Neo Geo ROM cart, the Neo Geo SD. So they announced the Mega SD, which is an FPGA optical drive emulator for the Sega CD.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And it works through the cartridge slot. So the way that they announced this was he literally took a Sega Nomad and put the Mega SD in it and played Sonic CD right off of the Nomad, which is impossible before this point. So it's worth noting that certain hardware configurations will need to be modified, but the major ones like the Genesis 1, the Genesis 2, and the Mega SG will be fully compatible with it.
Marvelous.
And you will not need additional hardware to play Sega CD games. It also functions as a Genesis cart, ROM cart as well, so it can replace any one that you currently have. It, however, still does need 32X hardware to play 32X games should you want to play them off of it. But this is a great step in the right direction. My big thing here with it is that the Sega CD takes up a lot of space and also has moving parts.
Yeah.
So it's very hard for me to fit in, even with a Mega SG, which is small, a Sega CD Sega CD2, which is smaller than the Sega CD1, into my entertainment center. So
I should say, like, the Sega CD2 is smaller than the one, but at the same, like, it depends on what dimensions you're talking. Exactly, yeah. It's much wider, whereas the Sega CD1, it's just another stack. So you get a lot less width, but it's taller.
Well, this is great. It apparently plays Sega Master System games as well.
Yeah, it's just covering everything.
Yeah, and with FM synth sound if you wish to play those versions of the soundtracks of those Sega Master System games. So it basically covers everything you could ever want other than the 32X bit. Really cool. I should also note that this company has made some gaffes in the past. It seems like they're trying to make good on it. They sent it to a lot of people in the retro gaming community to make sure that they liked it first before they announced it, which was actually a really good sense of goodwill. Like people like Smoke Monster, who have been putting out the ROM packs, and Retro RGB are already endorsing it. So I think they've already gotten like test cartridges and it's already in full production. You can actually pre-order one right now if you wish. It's worth noting that, as with anything else that's brand new, you may want to give it some breadth. I've been burned a lot by being an early adopter on hobbyist stuff like this. They may even come out with just like they did with the Neo Geo SD Pro. They may even come out with a slightly upgraded one after a year or two, where you can do the 32X. God knows what will happen, but it's really good on its own. It's just expensive. It's like $250, something like that. So your mileage may vary, but I know Lotus is definitely excited about this because he's been wanting an optical drive emulator for the Sega CD for a long time. So
yeah, that would indeed be cool. Like a lot of the Sega CD games, like the really more high-profile ones, are quite expensive and hard to find.
Yeah, no, this is a step in the right direction. I am very positive on it, but like I said, you may want to give it 6 months, to get the kinks out.
Yeah.
With additional firmwares, also to see if anybody finds any major incompatibilities, that kind of thing. But their work has been redeemed, even though they've had gaffes in the past. They have fixed things over time. So the other big announcement is that they announced that anybody who does have a Neo Geo SD Pro is getting an updated firmware, which will allow you to play Neo Geo CD games off of that cartridge on the cartridge-based systems, which was never a possibility in the past. I cannot play this because I have the regular version, but now I want the Pro version, and it's like $500. It sucks.
Yeah, Neo Geo anything, even the ROM card stuff is exceedingly expensive.
That's Neo Geo brand, right? That's always been.
Yep, and even the fan stuff is super expensive, so I guess nuts to me. The Crix, speaking of EverDrives, Crix has announced that, or Kirks, has announced that the EverDrive N8 Pro was announced for the Famicom and the and the regular Nintendo. This will be cool because it will get the final. It'll have enough RAM in there in the new FPGA in order to run a few fan hacks that were too big for the current one, and also some later pirate cards like the Final Fantasy VII, like Chinese bootleg that people tend to want to be able to play now. Also, there are a few other like minor things that you still can't play on the current one, like the Nintendo World Championship card. I don't think you can play, so hopefully that mapper will be available in the new one. We'll move on here. Just real quick, we've talked about the Genesis and Mega Drive Mini quite a bit, but apparently they are saying that there will have multi-language games in it as well. So if you get the Japanese one like I want to, you'll be able to play English ones if the ROM is available of those games.
Pretty awesome, because the systems in different regions have such a different selection of games.
Yeah, I mean, you would do well by yourself by getting both anyway.
The only unfortunate thing is that usually, like, what you really need the translation for is like the role-playing games that never got released in America, and that is impossible to play without an English translation or fluent knowledge of Japanese,
or
of
something.
course.
Yeah, luckily the majority of them, just like I think Langrisser 2 is the only RPG that doesn't have an English equivalent. Yeah, that's the only one that didn't get officially translated, as far as I can remember. So the rest of them have English equivalents that they can include, which is pretty cool. Moving on, this was a surprise. So the company that's been making those mini cabinets, the ones that are being sold at like Walmart,
GameStop, even,
and GameStop, yeah, they look like mini arcade cabinets. They announced 2 surprise ones with some licensed games on it that were a huge surprise. So yeah, this is being made by Tastemakers LLC, Arcade 1-Up. Yeah, Arcade 1-Up is the company. So the first one, this is a big surprise. is a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles one, which will be full 4-player. So 4 people will crowd around a tiny cabinet. But it comes with both Ninja Turtles arcade games, Konami arcade games from back in the day, Turtles in Time and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which is really awesome. It even has a Nickelodeon symbol on it, or logo on it, because the Turtles are owned by Nickelodeon now, which is kind of funny. But that's really cool. That's very unexpected, and it has the original side art and everything, which is really neat. Really cheesy, but it's pretty awesome. And then they're also coming out with a Marvel Superheroes one, a Capcom one, which will have Marvel Superheroes, the fighting game, X-Men Children of the Atom, which is another one of their CPS2 games, which is really good. And this is a surprise, The Punisher, which is a beat-em-up. Also a game that hasn't been re-released except on that weird plug-and-play console that we had talked about several months ago at this point, I think. But I think they're dropping that. There's a big controversy that I'm not even going to get into, but apparently they licensed an emulator that they shouldn't have. So I think that one's going to go by the wayside. A couple other little things here. R-Type Final 2 got funded on its Kickstarter at 200%. At the rate of 200%, so that's really awesome.
I think all of 100% for the first time they announced that was fake, an April Fool's joke, and 100% for the actual announcement.
Well, it looks like they got all their stretch goals too, which is even better. I think they're going to include a remake of the original R-Type with 3D graphics, which is pretty cool.
It was like a level of like several different R-Type games, all done in like the newest style. So like one from R-Type Final, one from R-Type Delta, like.
Really?
I guess I'm a little skeptical about that. Not that I was a big fan of the R-Type series or anything, but that's like a lot of development time that goes into like remaking a bunch of additional levels when the R-Type games usually aren't that long.
I should also say that while I was excited for this news and excited that they got funded, I did not participate in it because I've been burned on so many Kickstarters. Mm-hmm. I have no idea how this is going to go, and I don't know the track record of the company that's making it. To be honest, so I'm gonna wait and see and buy it when it comes out. That's just the way it's gonna be. I looked into it, and then like the shipping was too much in order to get the physical goods. It was like $30 just for shipping alone. So I kind of lost interest after that. So I kind of am moving on from that. So I am looking forward to seeing it if it ever comes out. Just a real quick plug here. Our friend of the show, Kurt Collada, Disco Alucard of Hardcore Gaming 101, released his Treasure themed digest recently. It's a fantastic book. It is based off of the development company Treasure and all of the games that people worked on before they went to Treasure and after they worked at Treasure, which is really neat. And games inspired by Treasure-like gameplay as well.
Yeah. I was just going to say he mentioned Treasure-like games as well.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book, just like all of his other ones. It's one of those books that it's such a good read that you don't mind having, it in physical form, even though he does post them online. It's just such a pleasing book to read.
Yeah, I think I'm going to pick up a copy from him at Too Many Games.
Yep. Oh, and Puyan actually came out on Switch. I actually commented that a few of Konami's like big old classic games didn't get ported in their Arcade Classics collection when that was released. Well, they just put out Puyan, and Time Pilot was like right before that. So they're making good on it. They're actually doing it, which is cool. And there's a couple. There's so much stuff here. Konami announced that they are also putting out a mini console, and since they own Hudson, what was that?
No, this is always really funny to me. This is like the equivalent of the Atari, the Infogrames wearing like the dead skin of Atari and using it to like pretend like they were Atari and we're like a seminal aspect of the history of video games. Konami, of course, was also a seminal part of the history of video games, but now they get to pretend like they took place in the 16-bit, like they were a hardware manufacturer during the 16-bit console wars.
It's true, but they've been pretty good to the Hudson properties in recent days. They've republished quite a few of their games on other consoles, including the Wii U and PS3 and Vita. So this is really cool. They own all of Hudson's back catalog, including all their first-party games from the TurboGrafx. So they're putting out a mini console as well. The North American and Japanese releases are going to be different. The cool thing is they are including CD games and cartridge games on this, which is very welcome.
So when are they going to confirm Lost in Shadow?
No comment. So the North American one will look like a TurboGrafx 16, which is pretty neat. It will have on it R-Type, timely. Ys Book 1 and 2, which is a great game, great compilation. Great version of that game. New Adventure Island, which is probably my favorite Adventure Island game. Ninja Spirit, which is a fantastic arcade port. Alien Crush, which is up there with one of the best console pinball games ever made. And Dungeon Explorer, kind of a mediocre Gauntlet clone. But, I mean, all of those so far are great.
Well, Dungeon Explorer, I think they only highlighted because it supports a 5-player multi-tap.
Yeah, but I mean, it only comes with the one controller, I think. But they are USB, so you could probably use a USB hub. So that's cool. Japanese version will have Bonk's Adventure, which I expect to be on the North American one, no problem. That's like the headlining platformer. Yeah. Dracula X, which is probably the best game on the system. It's a shame it's not coming to the American one yet, that we know of. Kung Fu China Warrior, which is up there with the worst game on the system. It's gigantic sprites and the game plays like garbage. It's an awful, awful game. It's worth playing if you want to make fun of an old crappy game. It's impressive looking, and then you play it and you're like, yuck. Ys Book 1 and 2 again. Superstar Soldier, which is one of the best shmups on the system. And
which is high praise, considering that's a shmup
It's the shmup system. Yeah.
It's like up Neo Geo was the fighting game system, TurboGrafx is the shmup system.
Yeah, I would say the TurboGrafx, along with the Dreamcast and the Switch, are probably the best shmup systems ever made. So I go as far as to say that. So this is cool, but we know very little about it, and we don't know who is emulating it. We know it's not. Nobody from M2 has spoken up or anything like that. We don't know how it's playing or anything like that. So don't get your hopes up. It just might look cool. But it's also kind of neat that they are putting out 3 different versions with the way the case looks for America, Japan, and Europe. The TurboGrafx never really had an official release in Europe. It kind of had like a weird mail order release. It wasn't like a real release. So they kind of just gave an alternate version of the PC Engine mold, which is kind of cool. Let me see here. The only other thing that I want to mention here before we wrap things up, we'll have to do fan stuff. Unfortunately, next week. Taito announced that they are putting out another collection. They put out that Darius collection, which is fantastic, but nobody can play, which is a shame. It really is a shame. But apparently this is a collection of a lot of the Space Invaders
that's cool.
games, which I'm actually pretty excited about. Space Invaders Extreme is going to be on there, which is one of the best. If you ask me, I like Space Invaders Extreme 2 even better, but that unlike Space Invaders Extreme 1, it never got ported past the DS, so I can understand why that one's not on there. But some really, really good games on that, and especially if you like Space Invaders, I'm sure it'll be great. And that's pretty much all I have to say for this week. I mean, we went over a ton of stuff. Does anybody have any final words before we wrap things up?
I don't think so.
I don't necessarily have anything to talk about now, but the next time I'm on the show, there is a lot of interesting wrestling news, both good and bad. A lot of good stuff. The launch of AEW, the new promotion, was very positive. And there's a lot of good news from the wrestlers who've managed to get out of WWF and find lucrative careers in terms of like their potential opportunities. And also the next Magic the Gathering Mythic Championship is this weekend, so we'll probably talk about the results next time I'm on the show. I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, I really wanted to give you a platform for that stuff, but as you said earlier in the day, that we just had so much to talk about that we might as well have spread it across the two shows. It's just one of those things. I had so much to talk about here. There wasn't even any filler this episode. We didn't talk too much about any crazy stuff. So, we'll have to catch you next time. That way you have a platform to talk about these things. And I do want to delve into the topic of CD Projekt Red, but it is also a sensitive one, so we want to give it its due. I don't want to glance over it if we're going to talk about it. I want to give it its time. So that is going to be the show for this week. We want to thank all of our fans that contributed questions. We are down to our last one. Is that correct, Lotus?
Yes. Last I checked, yes.
Okay. We do need more questions, guys. If you could give us as many as you can all at once, we could use a backlog. You guys have been really great with posting reactions. Unfortunately, we did not get a chance to get to them this week. However, we will read them next week. I always fulfill that promise whenever we say that. So we will definitely do that. So apologies for that, but we just had so much to talk about this week. A lot of interesting stuff. So we want to please keep us supplied with awesome topics by submitting questions of your own via the YouTube and SoundCloud pages. While there, please give us thumbs ups, likes, and 5-star ratings on iTunes. It helps promote and spread awareness of the show, and any bit of encouragement helps keep the show going. You can also catch us on Tuesdays on our sister podcast, Corrective Consciousness, the in-depth look at this week in our lives. Finally, you can friend me as vysethebold on Steam, Xbox Live, PSN, Twitter, and Battle.net.
And you could follow me on my YouTube channel, Lotus Prince. You can hit me up on Twitter at Lotus Prince. And finally, if you are interested in seeing my videos early, getting in on exclusive live streams, selecting upcoming games for me to Let's Play, or getting involved in conversations with me and other patrons on Discord, then perhaps consider swinging by my Patreon account, which can be found at patreon.com/LotusPrince.
You can find me as OldManStompy on most major gaming and social media networks, except for Steam and Twitter, where I'm actually OldManStompy CC, because I lost the password to OldManStompy, the regular account, quite some time ago. So that one is lost to Twitter forever. Thanks, Twitter. And that's it for me.
All right, well, we will catch everybody next week with another episode of Recon on Tuesday. We'll see you then.
Until next time, everyone.
Cheers.